Habiba Kabir, Boulder, Colorado. Well, I was raised in Iowa, in Waterloo, and I got out of there as quickly as I could, and I've traveled around quite a bit, kind of following guidance, really, just wherever I needed to be at the time, and moved to Boulder about, what's it been, 15 years ago maybe, or thereabouts, and met Kabir after I moved here. And we've been married now 13, maybe 12 years. So have two children, two boys. One lives in Iowa and the other in Denver. And,
siblings?
I have one sister. Mm-hmm. She lives in Iowa still. It's a really long story. I follow the Sufi tradition, the Nur Ashki Jarahi Sufi order that's from Turkey. Sufi orders come from many different places in the world, and our pir was from Istanbul, from Turkey. And how I came to that? Well, it wasn't particularly a choice, like a mental choice. I met a Sheikh Noor, about 20 years ago, maybe, in the Midwest, and I was already part of another Sufi order that came from India. But when I met him, and I didn't even know who it was, and someone went, "This is," and I took a hold of his hand, and everything just went white. And I stood there for the longest time, just totally gone, And then I kind of came back to myself, and he said, "Wow, you must have heard a lot about me. I've never seen anyone just take it all in one gulp like that." And I went, "Who are you?" And it was Sheikh Noor of our order. So there wasn't any doubt. There wasn't any way to doubt that this was where I belonged. And that's how I came to this particular path. The rest of the story is very long, but well, I was raised Christian, disciples of Christ. And I always asked a million questions, like things like, where's heaven? How far is forever? Things like that, until I got them all pretty disgusted with me at the church that we went to. And I never could really figure out as a child, like, what's going on? Where's the love? I don't understand. And so I ended up spending most of my childhood in the top of an apple tree, just looking at the clouds, reading books, just, okay, I don't know what's going on, so I'm just here doing this, And finally, I changed churches like in 5th grade because I couldn't stand it that they were saying one thing and doing something else. I didn't care if they did something else, but then I didn't think they should be saying it the opposite way, It seemed really strange to me, so I thought, well, I'll go to another church. But so I changed to Baptist, but it was the same there as far as I could see. But I just kind of stuck around. And till actually I was out of high school and I was going to some Bible study class. I was living in Seattle at the time. And these two young men came into the church, and they were asking directions to some other church, but they looked a little scruffy. And the women were just like so rude to them. I was like, after the men left, I said, they weren't asking you where a bar was. They just wanted to go to a church down the road. How can this be Christian to be like this to them? And they were just like, well, So I just said, okay, that's it with Christianity. I've had enough. So I really started to explore and read as much as I could about all different traditions. And I had this book that I divided, like a notebook, I divided it into sections: body, heart, mind, and spirit. And when I read something that felt right to me, I just wrote it wherever it fit. And people were like, yeah, how would you even know what the truth is? And I was like, well, I know what my heart says. So finally, I actually met the emissaries, which are up in Loveland, which is at Sunrise Ranch, where we just went to a retreat. And they were saying everything that was in my notebook. Plus, they had more. And I was like, yes, this is so great. So I got involved with them for about 5 years. And then I was living in an emissary center in Kansas City. And we did this big celebration of the heart on Valentine's Day. And we had an interfaith group that was meeting called Heartland Council that were like leaders from many different traditions. So we did a all-day celebration, and we did like the Baha'i were there, the Sikhs, it was everyone. And at the very last thing of that day, we invited the whole community. We had like 500 people turn up. And at the very last thing was Sufi dancing, it's now called Dances of Universal Peace, but then that's what they called it. And I was just like, oh, I'm home. This is right for me. So I was with them for about 15 years, and it was at one of their camps that I met Sheikh Noor. So that's the story.
How has this been received back home in Iowa? Your path?
Well, they never really understood what I was doing, And finally, I guess it was, actually I was living in Ohio, in Columbus. And this has been even before I met Sheikh Noor. My grandmother they'd put her in a retirement home, and she was having a fit. And this is the first time that I really thought they kind of got who I was. They called my family, my mother and dad, and my dad's sister, and said, we really need your help. Could you just come and talk to your grandmother? And so they sent me a plane ticket, and I flew home and talked to her. And ever after that, they were like, okay, we don't know what you're doing, but we trust that somehow, you have something to offer. So my parents have passed now, so it's not an issue anymore. It hasn't really been for quite a long time. I think I always had faith. I knew this wasn't working, but I knew there was something else that would or could or and sitting in that tree, I just felt such harmony in nature and in the clouds, and just I felt like there was a plan, but I didn't know what to call it particularly. And I wasn't seeing it manifest, but I was feeling it. So I don't know if you call that a memory, but it was a feeling. Well, okay, the Sufi concept, which I totally agree with, is that there's nothing else but God, that everything is God, that every breath we take is God expressing within the world, that the whole of creation, ever since the first flaring forth, has been God's plan unfolding. And that the only problem is that we believed we're separate. We believed we're separate from each other, from creation, from God, and it isn't the truth. And that really where we have to get to is the recognition that there's really nothing else.
It may have been something you already talked about, but what was the first time in your life where you feel like you had an experience owning that?
Mm-hmm. Well, after I had the experience with Sheikh Noor of just disappearing, we were together then for 10 days. It was a camp. And that whole time, and then for some months afterwards, I felt like everything was synchronistic, and that like a bird would fly by and I knew why, or I would be walking and suddenly I would know I needed to be over there. So I would go, and I would find someone crying. It was always like just this sense of wonder and awe at the magnificence of the way things really are when we get out of the way. And I think that was my first just like, yes, all right. That's how it needs to be. That's how we all need to be, because we all have that incredible potential to just be present in the moment and aware, and surrendered to the guidance that's always there.
Tell me about a time you doubted your faith. What happened?
That was a question on your list that I was like, wow, I wonder when that was.
Stop sending that to questions.
Well, I certainly didn't come up with any answers. I decided just let it flow, but doubted it. I mean, there's always moments of doubt, I think, especially when I allow myself to just like fall into the situation or the appearance of the situation, like on the planet right now. Say, for instance, it all looks so devastating, and what we've done to the planet and what we've done to the species that are so endangered and many that are already gone. If I let myself think about that without realizing that it's part of what we need to wake up, and it will get as bad as it needs to until we do, or not, depending, But I mean, I can fall into moments of doubt, but it doesn't last very long anymore. Yeah. Depends on what time of my life I go to. But I mean, I remember as a child, just this sense of, there was a song actually, a hymn that we sang that went, have thine own way, Lord, have thine own way. Thou art the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me after thy will, as I am waiting, living and still. And always just be still and know that I am God. It's been important. Now I have Sufi prayers that I do that are always great, like the Fatiha we do often, and it always brings me right back,
What is the Fatiha?
Well, it's the first surah of the Quran. I could do it if you'd like. Okay, want to join? Al-Fatiha, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. As-siratal ladina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladhdallin. Ameen.
What does that mean for you? Not a translation.
Yeah. Well, it means, that everything begins in the name of God. I mean, I can only really kind of give a translation, but for me, what it means is, it's just calling on that one who's always nearer than your jugular vein and saying, here I am ready and waiting, guide me, and lead me back to you, back to the remembrance of you. everything. I mean, even the things that at the time seemed like they were devastating, now I'm grateful for them because I can see how they fit and that I wouldn't have gotten to this point without them, you know. Um, I'm grateful you're here. I'm grateful we're all here together. That we all wake up and remember who we are. What I want them to know about me, it's easier to say what I want them to know about themselves.
Let's answer both.
Okay.
What do you want them to know about themselves?
What I want them to know about themselves is that their heart is so magnificent. And if they would just relax into that heart space and begin to love themselves fully, that we could live in paradise here on earth. And I guess what I'd want them to know about me is that I truly believe that it's possible and have had many, many, many experiences of that.
Tell me about a time you've experienced that.
Wow. Tell me about a time that I haven't. Let's see. Well, this whole retreat that we went on was so miraculous, and it felt like there were like 90 people gathered there that believed the same thing and knew it, and just the delight in being together and looking into each other's eyes and seeing that love was so magnificent. I feel it every Thursday when we gather and many, many times in between.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.